Okay, good afternoon, everyone. My name's Steve. I'll be chairing today. I'm just going to pause momentarily just to let the last few stragglers from the lobby in. So please do bear with me for a moment. Okay, I think we can probably make a start. So thank you all for coming along today. Very much appreciated. We are here obviously for the NMC Census dataset briefing, which I hope you're all very excited about. And before we get started with that, I'd just like to give you a very brief overview for those that are not fully aware of what these are all about. So the ADR UK Research Fellowship funding opportunity for this year actually opens for applications on Thursday morning of this week, so Thursday the 13th at 9 a.m. So do sharpen your pencils for that. We really, the fellowship opportunity is about a few key things. What we want to do is we want to unlock policy impact by enabling research that addresses real world challenges using the ADR England flagship datasets. And we want to ensure that there are trusted, high quality evidence produced through this data. And this is kind of underpinned by our flagship dataset framework, which sort of sets the standards for the datasets need to achieve to really be useful for researchers. Of course, we want to empower new users. So those of you who haven't worked with administrative data before, we want to enable you to get involved and start using this data. It's an absolute wonderful resource, and if we can help you access this data, then that's going to be a great thing. In terms of who the fellowship opportunity is open to, it's open to all researchers who are eligible for accreditation. And if your funding application is successful through the fellowship, you will need to become an accredited researcher under the DEA. But we're going to help you with all that once we get to that point in time. And the other thing that we want to do is to build on past work from previous fellows. We want to amplify their outcomes and create really help to create lasting benefits for society. And it's all about really inspiring the use of ADR UK flagship data and the research that comes out of that for the benefits of society. So, as you may know, we have produced a series of webinars with the help of various academic teams and data owning departments. And these are quite important because, as I said earlier, it's all about inspiring you, getting you excited about the data set and what can be done with it. So these kind of help you understand the scope of the opportunity. And to get an insight into some of the research opportunities that each data set offers. And alongside that is helping you to gain practical insights into or to shape strong and feasible research funding applications. And it gives you the opportunity as well to engage with data experts and partners who can actually answer your questions about the data sets and as you're developing your research agendas. So that's my little bit out of the way. So in this webinar, we're going to hear from Professor Ian Atherton, who is a Professor of Nursing and Data Science at Edinburgh and Napier. Expertise in population health and has previously worked in clinical nursing practice. So he has the frontline experience as well. And he's also involved with the Scottish Centre for Administrative Data Research. So, Ian, hello and welcome. If you'd like to just do a bit introduction of yourself, and then it's over to you.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate those words and that background. That's really, really helpful. So, can I first of all just double check that you can hear me okay and you can see my slides okay?
Yep,
Excellent.
I'll bring your slides on now, actually. So,
Okay.
there we go.
Lovely stuff. Thanks very much. So yeah, no, I'm delighted to have this opportunity to really raise the profile of the NMC Census England and Wales dataset. It's over 10 years now since we started thinking about how we might use registrant data. I say we, myself and colleagues from the Nursing and Midwifery Council. And with huge thanks to ADR UK, the ESRC, and to the Office for National Statistics, things have really moved forward in the last few years. So now we have this data set, which my colleague Michelle Jameson, who's also online and will be helping to field questions afterwards, we've started using this data set, but I think to really realize its full potential, it is an excellent opportunity that this fellowship has created. I should say those interested in nursing, midwifery, and other healthcare professions for that matter, there are other flagship data sets that you might want to consider. I am slightly biased. I'm really keen to see people using this NMC Census data set. So what I'm going to do over the next 20 minutes, half an hour or so, is really try and give you a sense as to the data set, the reasons why we moved it forward, and what it essentially is, how it's structured, what it covers, the kinds of variables that are in there. I'm particularly going to point towards information that's available online, so that you have opportunity to really get to grips with what's in there if you're going to use it. I'm going to give some pointers to what I think makes a strong fellowship application as I'm talking through things. A key part of these fellowships and using data such as this is that it has impact, that it has policy potential. So as I'm talking through them, I'll try and give you a sense as to the reasons why this data set came into being, almost in a, as putting the case forward for using that data. So without further ado, let's just have a think about why this data set has come into existence. So I guess the first thing to flag up is nurses are, and again, I'm a registrant myself, so I am biased, but nursing and nurses is incredibly important. The screenshot that you can see in front of you now is what I think is fair to say is a seminal paper within nursing. It's over 10 years old now, but it was a paper that really highlighted the links between nurse staffing levels and hospital mortality. And basically what it demonstrated across a number of countries is that shortages of nursing are associated with higher patient mortality. So put in short, if you don't have enough nurses, it has implications for people's well-being and indeed their deaths. So incredibly important. I think it's fair to say the evidence base around midwifery is also convincing, and perhaps intuitively that's not surprising. If you don't have sufficient numbers of midwives, that's got implications for outcomes for mothers and for their babies. So nurses and midwives absolutely crucial to patient well-being and hence to the public. This is taken, the screenshot's taken from a report from the World Health Organization that came out just a few weeks ago. And the key points that I would flag up to you is there are a lot of nurses worldwide, about 29 million nurses, over 2 million midwives, but internationally, we are facing a shortage. We are already facing a shortage. The World Health Organization report flagged up that they believe there will be almost 5 million nurses short globally, almost 1/3 of a million midwives short by the year 2030. And that's got big implications for us in the UK. This screenshot is taken from the report that came out again just a few months ago, the 10-year plan for England and Wales. Sorry, for England. It is specifically for England, but it has lots of implications. I think the issues that it's grappling with have implications UK-wide as well as internationally. Part 7 of that report deals with the workforce side of what's envisaged to unfold over the next decade. And it absolutely grapples with these issues of shortages. It highlights that there's going to be fewer staff than was predicted in the previous plan. The previous plan had very large increases envisaged. This report is saying those increases are not going to be so substantial, but it really is placing emphasis on reduced international recruitment. They want to see it less than 10% by 2035. Currently it sits at, I think, in England, it's close to 50%. So that's quite notable. We could debate the pros and cons of that approach. But one point is clearly, given international shortages, there is a vulnerability there. So really trying to focus on recruitment and retention of staff, and nurses and midwives and other healthcare staff for that matter, is a key part policy-wise for NHS England moving forward, and more widely, I think it's fair to say, across the UK. Now, we have a stakeholder group that I'm hugely grateful to over the years whilst we've been developing this data set. They have inputted considerably, and really drawing on discussions we've had with them as well as from this policy document and others. This is just an indication of the kinds of policy issues that you might want to think about. It is not exhaustive, but it's the kind of issues that you could potentially use the NMC Census England and Wales data set to specifically look at. I've just pick out one or two there. There is migration, which I've already touched on. There's aging, the nursing workforce, midwifery workforces, as is the population, is aging, perhaps is more aged indeed than the general population. So that's got all kinds of implications in terms of health, in terms of retention. So lots of issues that you might think about there. I flagged up community nursing and midwifery there. Again, a big part of the NHS England 10-year plan is the focus on the community. So there may be things within that you might want to think about. But we can come back to some of these points, or if you have other ideas, whether in this webinar at a later point. More than happy to pick up with you. So let's now think a little bit about the NMC Census England Wales dataset. I guess key point in terms of this webinar is it is a flagship dataset, part of ADR UK's family of datasets. And that's got lots of advantages, and I'll be flagging up some of the advantages. Key one in terms of this funding call is it is eligible for funding within the fellowship scheme. So let me tell you a little bit about that data set. First thing to point out is there is a really good website that ADR UK have provided. I'm going to be drawing a lot on that website over the next 10-15 minutes. I'll be focusing in on one or two key resources that it enables. This screenshot just scanning down a little bit. just highlighting some of the points, but I'm going to come back to them in more detail later on, so I won't dwell too long on this slide. One of the things you will find on in that website is this diagram giving an overview of what is contained. And essentially what's contained in that data set are two sources of data. There is the Nursing and Midwifery Council Register for the UK, and there is the Census 2021 for England and Wales. Taken on their own. I mean, obviously the census is one of our key tools of social data for the UK. It's highly complete, and it covers a wide range of topics, and the bullet points down the right-hand side gives some indication there. But again, we'll think about that in a little bit more detail in a moment. And then there is the UK register as held by the Nursing and Midwifery Council. So let me talk a little bit about what the register involves. So the register is something that anybody who wants to practice as a nurse or as a midwife in the UK legally has to be registered with. So anybody that say comes from overseas who wants to practice, they have to meet the requirements of the Nursing and Midwifery Council if they are going to be able to apply for any positions as a nurse or as a midwife. Likewise, if anybody wants to become a nurse or a midwife, they have to complete a course that is recognised by the NMC in order to come onto that register. And then once people are on that register, they have to revalidate every 3 years. So they have to demonstrate to the NMC that they still have the knowledge and the skills, and they are up to date with their knowledge and skills in order to continue practicing. They also have to demonstrate that they have worked a minimum number of hours, 450 hours, within the previous 3 years. So it's a public confidence. It's to give public confidence that anybody who is employed in a role as a nurse or a midwife meets minimum standards. So from a regulatory point of view, very, very important. But like a lot of these administrative processes, it also involves the collection of data. And that data is a powerful resource in and of its own right. But then once it's linked to other data sets, it becomes so much more powerful. So essentially, you can go online, you can enter somebody's name, you could enter my name, and you can get information that demonstrates whether or not that person is on the register, and that it is kept up to date. As I say, people revalidate every 3 years, and that involves the collection of data, and I put in the bullet points down the right-hand side, just an indication of the kinds of information that is captured. So over and above the census, much more detailed information on the registration. So the number of years that person has been registered, the country within which they trained, so you can get some indication from a point of view of whether somebody is trained overseas or in another in Scotland or in England. You get information on the type of registration, whether the person is a nurse or a midwife or indeed both, and the branch. So nursing is divided in the UK, it's divided into 4 branches: mental health, adult, learning disability, and children's nursing. So there's information on exactly what branch that person is on the register, what qualifications they have to enable them to be within which particular branch. There's some indication on employment, and that's specific to the 450 hours that the person has used as basis for remaining on the register. And there is some information on demography and geography. Something to highlight, not all fields are mandatory. And I'll talk a little bit more in a few moments about how you can find out just exactly. I mean, this is a very broad overview, but I'll talk in a few moments about how you can find much more specific information to enable you to put together your proposed project. So that's the register. In short, it is comprehensive. Anybody practicing as a nurse and midwife in the UK, they will be on that register. And it is up to date, at least within 3 years. Very reliable source of data on nurses and midwives. And that has been linked to the census. Now, the reason we linked to the census, I kind of already alluded to, it is an amazing source of social data. The screenshot you can see in front of you, that's a screenshot of one of the pages from the paper version. Many people completed online at the last census. There's all kinds of information that the census contains. I was really keen to see us linked to the census, largely because my sense is that, especially when it comes to nationally representative quantitative analysis, there really has not been a social science of the nursing and midwifery professions. And I think that there are many elements of people's social lives that have implications for their retention, their recruitment, their ability to practice. So by linking to the census, it really enriches really what can be the research questions that can be asked, and the analysis that can be taken forward. So by linking the census to the register, we suddenly have a very comprehensive overview of the nursing and midwifery professions in England and Wales. The census was specifically England and Wales, because there were censuses in Northern Ireland and a year later than in 2022 in Scotland. But for this particular data set, we have the linkage specifically to England and Wales. So again, in summary, the census, comprehensive social data. When linked to that comprehensive register data, we have a really valuable basis for social science research focused on two really key professions. So that's an overview of the two administrative data sources. Let me just try and talk you through the way in which the data sets have been structured. There are currently 4 years of data that have been linked to the census, 2018, 2021, 2022, and 2023. And there are various benefits to that linkage. The most obvious one is that linkage for 2021. So it's a cross-section of the register in March of 2021. The census also happened in March. So as a cross-sectional, the basis for a cross-sectional analysis, just alone, that 2021 data is hugely powerful. We know exactly sort of the work Michelle's currently doing. We know the occupations that people were doing in the month of the census, people who are on the register. We've also have linked, I say we, it's some very, very clever people in the Office for National Statistics have linked the cross sections of the register from 2018 and from later years, 22 and 23. And that's got various benefits. It's longitudinal, so you can follow people through. It is pseudonymized. But within that scope, you can follow people through from 2018 through 2021, 2022, and 2023. So you can see how they've changed in terms of, for example, potentially qualifications that they have got related to their registration. If they drop off the register, you can get a sense of that, or people that come onto the register. So, for example, if you picture people who are on the register in 2018 who drop off before 2021, then you still have that 2021 census data. So you've still got the potential to understand that group of people who have dropped off the register. And likewise, people who are not on the register in 2021, but who are on the register in 2022 or 2023, then you've got a basis for analysis based on their situation in the census in 2021. Slight addendum as well, as you can see in the bottom left-hand corner, there is an additional data set, a data set of leavers. The reasons for that is simply the way the data set developed. We had this 3-year gap. So that data set, essentially what it adds on is the indication of people who have left the register between those 2 points. It provides an indication of the point at which they dropped off the register. So that's an overview of what is essentially a longitudinal data set and how it has been linked to the census. So the census is a snapshot in 2021, but we have that snapshot for people on the register at 2021, but also even if they've left the register, sorry, even if they've left the register before the census in 2021, and likewise people that have come onto this register at later years. So that's a brief overview of the structure. In terms of the geographical coverage, I've already kind of given some indication of this. The NMC data registration, although health is something for the Scottish Parliament, the Welsh Parliament, Northern Ireland. So health is specific to each of the UK countries. Nonetheless, the register is UK-wide. So the register data covers the whole of the UK. But the census data is specifically for England and Wales. So the way that's set up, some advantages you may want to draw on. My own fellowship, I'm not sure I mentioned, I have a fellowship. Currently, I'm one of the ADR UK fellows. I'm looking at migration within the UK, so that's got clear potential to draw on that UK-wide data. And there may be creative ways in which you can utilize that, the way that has been set up. That's a geographical coverage. Let me go back to that website and just highlight some of the potential benefits of information that's available there. Up at the top there, you'll see that there is a user guide, and essentially that user guide is akin to the presentation I'm giving just now. It gives you an overview of the data, how you go about accessing it. I'll come back to the access in a few moments. Crucially, there is a data dictionary. I would really urge you to really know the data set well by the time you're submitting your application. The data dictionary tells you specifically the variables that are available. And through that, you can think through just what kinds of analysis might be enabled that you can use to convincingly answer your research question. So data dictionary, both for the register data and for the census data, absolutely invaluable. In terms of accessing the data, again, information on the website. We can talk about that a little bit more in a few moments. But as Steve's already indicated, you will need to be an accredited researcher. there is information within there as to how that is enabled. The data set currently sits in what's called the integrated data service, but it's moving to the what's called the secure research service. So for your applications, it is going to be towards data that sits within the ONS secure research service, which has lots of benefits to it. Yeah, that should really facilitate your work. And then there's also information on the fellowships. One or two things that I will flag up. As we're working through our projects, we have found that there are missing records for 2021, 2023. It's a relatively small proportion, but we are working on approaches that will enable you to essentially have a much more complete data set drawing on other rounds of the census, and we are looking to share the approaches that we're developing. There's some errors in the registrant data. Administrative data, this is part and parcel of using administrative data. But again, there are workarounds, and again, we will be providing information on those workarounds. The main workaround is you can draw on the census data where there are question marks over some of the register data. Here's just the challenges of moving the data from what is an administrative system into a something that can enable research, and specifically getting snapshots up from a number of years ago. So not massive problems, but just to be aware of. And like I say, we will be providing some data resources papers to help and facilitate you there. So as I've alluded to, we have a couple of projects at the moment that's using this data set. Michelle is spearheading one, looking at the occupations of nurses and midwives in England and Wales at the point of the 2021 census, so very much that kind of cross-sectional analysis. And my own fellowship is looking at migration patterns of nurses and midwives, and hugely grateful to Michelle, as well as colleagues in the Nuffield Trust, at the University of Bristol, and elsewhere, who are supporting that work in Royal College of Nursing. So that's the two projects we're currently moving forward. Part of those projects and part of the fellowships as well is really understanding the data and helping to develop the data. This is a new resource, and as I've alluded to in my previous slide, inevitably that involves better understanding just exactly how the data is set up and ways of overcoming the inevitable challenges. It's a key element to the work that Michelle and I are doing, but also I think important elements of anybody using this data to really contribute to the wider research community. So in summary, this is a real chance to develop a social science of the nursing and midwifery professions, using nationally representative data, something which to my knowledge is pretty much internationally unique. There's fantastic longitudinal study of nurses in Sweden, but it's relatively small, 5,000 people, and is now becoming quite dated. In terms of something that's really up to date, that is nationally representative, that is large scale, I think that this is really happy to be, if anybody can correct me, but I don't think there's any resource like this internationally. So it's a powerful data set. We're only just beginning to realize its potential, and it's a really important group whose recruitment and retention and well-being has real implications for patient outcomes. So yeah, I've already alluded to the website, and on the website you'll find a means of contacting my UCRE colleagues, and through them, myself, Michelle, as well. So yeah, I mean, that's just 25 to just now. So I did say I'd leave lots of time for questions. So what I'll do is I'll stop presenting there. And yeah, Steve, I'll hand back over to you at that point.
Excellent. Thank you, Ian. That was enlightening. Really interesting stuff. So yeah, that's I've learned a lot today. So well done. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
that. Okay, so I'm sure our attendees are busy typing away their questions as we speak. So just to get us started, um, I'm wondering what, if any, kind of sort of important topics beyond those that you mentioned that could perhaps be answered or looked at using this data set. Is there anything that sort of springs to mind in terms of areas of research interest and government missions, for example?
Yeah, no, that's a very good question. I mean, I've alluded to the NHS plan for England and Wales, and clearly retention and well-being is a very important element of that report. And I think there's similar concerns really across the UK and more broadly internationally. I've highlighted that the nursing and midwifery workforces are aging. Off the top of my head, I can't remember exact figures, but there's a very large proportion of people who are going to be retiring over the next few years. And that's got a number of issues, both in terms of recruitment, and especially if we're going to be less dependent on international recruitment, but it's also got lots of implications for keeping people able to work for as long as possible. So understanding um, health of especially as people are getting into the later years of their career. And understanding how social dynamics impinge on that. So socioeconomic status, how that impinges on people's well-being. I think there's also lots of work that can be done around other life course events that can draw on census data, for example, unpaid care. It's not something we've been able to look at, but my gut feeling is that there's um, nurses are likely to be drawn upon to provide unpaid care, perhaps more than the general population. I've not seen any evidence to substantiate that, but that's what this data set is all about. So, is that so? And if so, do we see evidence of people dropping off the register if at point of census they are indicated to be providing unpaid care? And the census has some quite detailed information around unpaid care in terms of the number of hours, and that's got policy potential. Likewise, people who are having children, if there are dependent children in the household, what are the implications for people remaining on the register? So retention is clearly a really important, given where we are in the health service. I suppose the other things that have come through from stakeholder groups, there are particular groups of nurses for whom there's particular concerns, learning disabilities nurses. Numbers of learning disabilities nurses have been going down over recent years. So that particular group, nurses working in the community as well, what is their demographic profile? Are they particularly at risk given that NHS 10-year plan? And yeah, I mean, I think since I've been in nursing, there has been this drive to try and move services into the community, but it's becoming more and more acute. So yeah, those are all issues that I think policymakers would really appreciate evidence that can inform steps that they take.
Excellent. That's a really comprehensive answer, Ian. Thank you very much for that. Um, I'm going to bring in my colleague Mike, who has been diligently looking at the chat and the Q&A function there. Mike, have there been anything? Has anything come in that we think we'd like to address?
Yeah, we've got a couple of questions. So the first one, thank you for a great introduction. In terms of geographical information like place of residence, place of employment, what granularity is available, i.e. postcode, LSOA and LAD?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Um, I'm almost certain that there is quite quite a detailed level of geography. So I think that you would be able to get it down to LSOA. Um, but I would really urge people to look at the data dictionary. My slight lack of certainty is that we're in the process of moving from the integrated data service to the secure research service. So one of the slight disadvantages is we don't have the same flexibility. What I would suggest is that people look very carefully at the data dictionary. But the answer to your question is there's a reasonably detailed level of geography that would enable you to look at differences across the UK and, of course, to aggregate up from there to health boards or local authorities.
Thank you. Okay, Mike, do you want to go for another one? I see there's a couple more coming.
Yeah. Does the data set include dates of initial joining the register? And in the case of those who have left the NMC, the reason for leaving?
Yeah, no, that's a very, very good question. So in terms of when they joined the register, so there is data available on how long people have been on the register, and from that you can work out the year that they joined the register. So fairly simple, yes to that. In terms of the reason, that's less straightforward. The NMC do have a survey of leavers, but that survey cannot be linked to other data because it doesn't have the personal identifiers that would be required for the probability match that ONS have done. So we don't have specific information from the register data as to why people have left. But we do, and this is where this the way the linkage has been structured is really valuable. So if we think again about that 2018 data, we know who was on the register in 2018. So we can create a group of people who have left the register before the census. So we can then analyze data as it stood in 2021, which can give some indication as to, at a population level, why people may have left the register. So there is indication, for example, of employment. So you can get a sense of are people still employed? And if so, what sort of occupations were they doing in 2021? There is information from the census as to if people are retired. So if we know that people have dropped off the register prior to the census, and they are indicated in the census to be retired or not working for reasons of ill health, then there's a good basis there for extrapolating. And I think one of the challenges of administrative data, but also one of the reasons why it's so compelling as something to be involved in, is the potential to be creative and to think about what are the kinds of proxies that we potentially could use. So I think there's a massive amount that can be done to better understand, why people are leaving the register. And if there are specific groups who are particularly vulnerable to leaving the register with clear policy outcomes.
Fantastic. Michael, I think there's a bit of a follow-up second part to that.
Yeah, just to follow on from assuming that the data set is concerned with dates of registration and deregistration, can it be assumed that NMC registration is equivalent or at least approximately to employment within the NHS and or private practice?
Yeah, no, that's a brilliant question. And in our discussions with the with our stakeholder group, one of the key questions that came through time and time again was exactly that. If somebody's on the register, are they actually in employment? So that's really what Michelle has been focusing the initial analysis on. So you absolutely can't assume that just because somebody's on the register that they are necessarily working. And there's lots of reasons why that might be. The 450 hours that they indicate to have worked may have been a couple of years prior to revalidation. It may be that they've retired since. So we're doing lots of work looking at that. By and large, the indication is much more than I don't know, Michelle, I'm putting words in Michelle's mouth here. The levels of employment within nursing indicated within the census in 2021 were much higher than I kind of envisaged. I don't know, Michelle, do you want to say something about that?
Yeah, it is an interesting one, John. And like Ian was saying before we started our work, we kind of thought a little bit differently. And this is very fresh work in the last 2 or 3 weeks or so. So the indication is that, yeah, the majority of registrants are indicated to be, but I would always assume you can't, you can't approximate that with working clinically. I don't know if that helps or hinders your answer, Ian, but I would err on the side of caution.
I think that's good advice.
Yeah.
So, I mean, just very, very briefly, Michelle's been using SOC 20 codes, which indicate the occupations that people were engaged in at point of the census. And SOC codes include whether people were nursing or engaged in other employment activities. So you may well, I think that's good advice. You may want to give some thought to including that information in your analysis so that you can be more confident that these people, were employed as nurses in 2021, depending on what your research question is. Of course, or indeed that maybe that what you're interested in is people who are not employed in nursing at that point in time. So I think that is good advice that the valid data, that variable does exist. So that's certainly something that you can draw on. In terms of understanding what people were doing, in terms of more specifically, the register data does have some indication as to if people were working in the community or were working in hospitals. It's fairly broad brush. Again, I'd really urge you to have a look at the data dictionary. It has information on the data available on occupation from the register. Its classifications are not straightforward, but they do give some indications to whether people were working care homes or the care home sector or within the hospital sector. We don't know for certain whether they were in the NHS or whether they were in the private sector. Again, administrative data has huge benefits. Inevitably, like any dataset, it also has some limitations. So yeah, I don't know if that helps at all.
That was excellent. Thank you both. Appreciate that. I think there's another one here from John again on the data, and John's asking: are the employment band and dates achieved that those bands are achieved included? For example, enrolled with the NMC as a band 5 in January 2021, promoted to a band 6 in 2022.
So no, that information isn't available. That's health service data applies specifically to the health service. So we don't have that within this particular data set. Again, I think there are various proxies that people might use. So within the register data, there is indication, or indeed within census data using the SOC codes, there is indication that people have moved into management roles, for example. So it's a crude indication of, for want of a better expression, of promotion. But it is no more than a very proximate indication. In terms of specific, band 5 moving to band 6 or band 7, no, that detail isn't available.
Excellent. Hopefully that sheds a bit of light on that for John. Mike, do you want to pick up another one?
Yeah. Are there any links we could potentially use with data on domestic violence? Are there any links of this nature with, for example, police and crime stats?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. Within the NMC census data set, no. But I wonder whether there may be other flagship data sets that would enable that analysis. I'm not overly familiar with the other justice data sets. But I do think that it is well worth looking at some of the other flagship data sets. If they have occupational data, you might be able to utilize that. If you have particular focuses on nurses and midwives, and violence, you might be able to use one of these other data sets. Michelle, I don't know if there's anything that occurs to you in addition to that.
No, just that with this data set, there's nothing you could pull that would pull from crime. So it would be worth looking at the flagship justice data sets, if you're certainly wanting to focus on that for this call.
Yeah, I think I would echo that. I mean, there may be some practical implications about having the two data sets in the same project space. But my understanding is that you can make the request to ONS. But I would probably think about having that discussion with them first before you really sort of develop your research agenda, just to be sure what is and what isn't feasible in that respect. But yeah, I mean, the justice portfolio is there's some great data in there as well. So it's definitely worth exploring that a bit further.
Yeah, I'll just really add to that. That's really helpful, Steve. I do think that there is something about keeping projects, for want of a better expression, simple, because they always end up being much more complicated than you ever envisage. So, I think that that's really good advice. If you are interested in a particular occupation and violence, then look at one of the justice data sets and consider using them standalone. Yeah, I think it'd be very, it'd be really challenging to use more than one data set. I shouldn't, but I wouldn't rule it out. But yeah, it'd be very challenging.
Yes, there is a lot to be said for keeping it simple where you can, and you've got the principle of limiting the data that you're actually requesting as well. That's an important thing to consider. But it's funny you should say that. Then just something that I'm a bit curious about. And this is more sort of on the practical side of actually using and getting to grips with the data within the TRE. How much work goes into it for the researcher to actually kind of link tables together, develop the code to carry out the analysis? Can you give us a bit more of an insight on what it actually means to have your hands on the data and do the work?
This one's definitely for you, Michelle.
Yeah. Yes, and I shall not frighten anyone. It's honestly a great experience to be working with the data and in the TREs. I've been very fortunate to work across the different TREs. I would say to everyone, factor in at least double the time you think it will take you for everything, for access, for the code, for getting outputs, because obviously we're working within the Secure Researcher Service. That's not us taking the outputs out right away. That needs to go to checkers for statistical disclosure control and everything else. That takes time. I know this webinar isn't about it, but working within the SRS also involves, like, it's a closed system. You're not connected to the internet. So in terms of writing code, it can be difficult to error check and things like that. So very much, I cannot recommend enough familiarising yourself with the TRE systems and getting to know some of the customer service people on a first name basis, because they will help you a lot. Yeah, factor in more time than you need.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you. That's a great little insight there. Get to know people on a first name basis. Very good, very good. Okay. And also thinking about the data, and we just sort of talked about other flagship data sets alongside that, but is it possible to use supplementary data such as survey data alongside this data set?
That's a really interesting question. In terms of its fit with the funding call, you'd know much more than I do there, Steve. I think that the work that Michelle has been doing has really highlighted the potential of using nationally representative survey data for analysis of nurses and midwives, again using those SOC codes. So I think as well, an important element of work like this is really thinking outside the box and thinking about how a question might be addressed using administrative data and tangentially survey data as well. So what I would say is, think of your research questions, think creatively. I think there almost certainly will be potential to use those data sets. If not within this funding call, I think that the work that is being done is really demonstrating how valuable those survey data sets are. Again, Michelle, is there anything you would add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I would say for this funding call, it's such an interesting question. The first thing that comes to my mind is if you wanted to use another data set, then it maybe wouldn't sit within the TRE. It just depends who owned it and whether it would be applicable for your funding call. And I'd also say be wary of your times as well. All of this takes a very long time. I suppose there could be things around you could use, say, a data set you could access safely via the UK data service to then quality check or quality control things like SOC codes with the data set that's in the TRE, for example. That would be an interesting one. But again, to say what Ian and Steve has said today, like, you have a finite amount of time for this fellowship, so I would definitely consider that. Yeah.
Yeah, just to say, yeah, supplementary data is permissible under the funding opportunity, provided it meets the necessary requirements under the rules of the SRS. So again, I'd engage with ONS on that particular aspect early to get a full understanding of what you can and can't do. But yeah, no, that's really interesting. There's a couple of great insights there on actually getting to grips and working within the TRE with this data set. So that's really helpful. Thank you. Mike, have the questions dried up? Because I'm just looking at the time and I think we're about there.
Yeah, I think that was everything. There was one at the start of the webinar, but I'm not quite sure the context. It was just about how we support the disability community. That was the only thing. But yeah, I'm not sure what context was it.
Yeah, I think the person who posted that actually left very soon after posting that. So I think we can, unless Ian or Michelle has anything that springs to mind in that.
I have to say I'm not sure quite exact. I don't know if it's in relation to analysis of nurses with disabilities. Yeah, again, I'm going to refer to Michelle here. I mean, there are questions in the census around health and disability. So it is actually quite, potentially that's what was in mind. There are some really interesting questions there. I don't know if you have any thoughts, Michelle.
Yeah, depending on the context of the original poster's question, yeah, there is indication of disability, long-term health conditions and things that you can use. For example, on the registrant side, it is a binary question. They'll ask if you have a disability or not. If the original poster meant in terms of working with the data, say in terms of the TRE, it's fully accessible. Everyone is very understanding. So in terms of if you are a researcher who lives with a disability, it's not something I think would stop you in terms of working with the data or things like physical access requirements and things like that. Obviously, I can just speak from my own experiences, but yeah.
Excellent. Okay, great. Right, before I let everyone go then, I just want to say thank you, Ian, and thank you, Michelle.
Thanks to yourselves. Thank
You're
you.
most welcome. But it's a really great webinar. I found it really informative myself, and I hope everyone who attended found it interesting too. Just very quickly, just want to flag that webinars for previous dataset briefings, plus an opportunity briefing for applicants and writing a good funding application webinar for applicants. They're all available on our website. And as I say, remember that the opportunity opens for applications on Thursday morning. So hopefully we'll see some applications coming through from you all. So I think we can wrap it up there. And again, thank you ever so much, Ian. And thank you, Michelle. And hopefully we'll catch up with each other again soon.
Thanks very
Thank
much,
you.
everyone.
All the best. Take care.
Thank you.
Cheers now.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Bye.